Today, I'm joined by someone I've worked with for a long time, Kashif Noor. Kashif, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Kashif Noor. I work as a security engineer for a cloud communication company.
Thanks. And Kashif, the reason I've asked you to join this call today is security is just top of mind. So we all read about ransomware and millions or tens of millions of dollars or pounds that the bad guys are getting out of companies that we recognize. We hear about data breaches, there's the GDPR and fines, and there's individuals. I think all get text and spam and phishing things and so on, trying to con us and get our money essentially. So security is up there. Now you work with me, but you work for a vendor, and typically, we work together when you're answering questions that prospective customers are interested in. And I'd like to turn that around now. I'd like to say you've got huge amounts of experience now. And if you worked on the other side of the fence, if you worked as a buyer or in procurement and in the security team there, you're an expert. So what would you be looking for in a cloud vendor?
First of all, thank you, Paul, for inviting me for this chat. So answering your question, we would first need to identify what our needs are in terms of a cloud vendor. So various types of clouds, public, private, or hybrid cloud. So we need to identify what type of cloud can fulfill our requirements. So at a high level, private cloud is where resources, application services are dedicated to your organization. Public cloud is where these resources, services, processes are shared with other organizations. And hybrid cloud is a mixture of both. You may have storage on-prem, but you have your processes or your applications running in a public a data center or public cloud, such as Azure or AWS.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So once you've made, once you identified what sort of cloud vendor you need to go with, then you start looking into things like certifications and standards, what you need to look for in a vendor.
Yeah, and so thank you for that. And I think I've got another video coming up actually with one of the architects where we're looking at the differences between types of cloud, but obviously we're working in an environment which is public cloud. So you mentioned standards there. So why are standards important?
Yeah, the standards are important because they essentially, what they do is they mitigate the risks that a company may have. So in a way, when you implement policies and procedures, so essentially what you're doing is you're mitigating risks to the company, and you put policies and procedures in place to overcome those risks. These standards can cover a lot of things. For instance, access control, physical security, which is again very important, incident management, development and maintenance of information assets. So these controls like ISO, SOC 2, or HIPAA, for instance, cover a lot of these things. So that can really give you understanding of what your needs are and how these needs could be met by a certain vendor. And also, if your vendor have all these certifications and have invested heavily in these sort of resources, it gives me as a buyer some confidence that I can, go buy this product with confidence, knowing that these guys are serious about security and they have made huge investments in this sort of certification and compliance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I got one question here because, when we were going through ISO 27001 years ago, And one of the auditors that came to see us told me, I think it was a joke, but I'd love your opinion on this, because I heard this rumor that some companies certify to something like ISO 27001 and then do it for a back office function. I mean, nothing wrong with doing it for HR, it should be included anyway, but that's it. And they go claim their ISO 27001 accredited or certified, and it's only if you look at the scope that you realize, really. So tell me a little bit about scope. What would you as a buyer be looking for when you're looking at the scope?
Yeah, scope is actually crucial in terms of your ISMS, and having the understanding of the areas that needs to be covered by the certification. So the auditor needs to know the areas that need to be audited. And then, yeah, of course, you can go ahead and just have a HR function certified. But when you have, with ISO certificate, you have something called statement of applicability. So that tells you in detail what areas are covered under this audit. So, yeah, so scoping is really important to identify the areas that are protected by this, certification or this compliance audit.
And you then, as a buyer, will be looking for a broad scope, presumably, something that fundamentally covers almost all the operations in the company.
All services, processes, people, systems, yes, that should all be covered in a scope for ISO specifically, yeah.
Okay, so now tell me a little bit about data security and governance.
Yeah, another important factor when you looking for a vendor is data security and data governance. At a really high level, data governance is basically protecting the data throughout its life cycle, having processes and procedures and various controls in place to protect the data. Again, for this, you need to know the value of your data. So obviously that would come from a risk assessment or impact assessment that you would do for your data. You must know if you're choosing a vendor who has access to your data, how's your data protected, where is your data located, what are the local geographical regulatory requirements where your data is stored. So all of these things would help you to understand and kind of shortlist the prospective vendors, so you can go further and inquire in much depth after that. Okay,
and just the last question now, because amazingly we're going to be out of time. So let's say you're on the buyer's side, you've been told there are 2 or 3 different vendors we want to assess as part of a process. And you've obviously now going to come up with a load of questions. Are the answers to those questions going to be binary? So are you asking the vendor yes, no? Or are there degrees? Because, is protection and risk mitigation binary, or is it kind of like on a scale of 1 to 5? And do you let the vendor self-score, or are you going to do that? How does that work?
Yeah, I think a vendor can self-score. There are controls out there that would put these controls into numbers, for instance. But I think it really depends the risks attached to the type of service that you're going to be using and type of data is involved. So it really depends on the data and the risk associated with it. So I can't really put a score on it, but it's, as I said, it's really dependent on the data that you have and risks attached to the data.
Okay. Yeah, I think we could go on, because for me, we're out of time, but for me, it's a fascinating area and it's right there, top of mind at the moment. So I know you've got a really interesting job. Kashif, thank you so much for your input today.
Thank you, Paul.